Welcome to People Love Process. In order to use your logo designs in any context, you need to make sure they work on both a light and dark colored or photographic background. So let's go over a few best practices on creating reverse brand assets. This is best shown than explained, so let's get started. Now, I should point out that not every logo needs this. Certain types of logos do, and you'll be able to make that decision as you're creating whatever design you're creating. A good example of a logo that wouldn't need this would be the Nike swoosh. It works great on a white background, and it works great on a dark background because nothing's needed other than just changing the color of the fill of that shape. So this is an easy example, but sometimes branding projects can be a little more complex. Let's take a look at a complex design, and this would be one. The old style kind of diving suit is kind of the brand mark, and the logo lockup we did for it looks like this. Now, this looks great on a white background, but there's something we need to cover because at times you're going to have to deal with this when you're creating all the various assets that you're going to provide to a client. And one of these things is called irradiation. It's a visual trickery of the eye where anything light on a dark colored background tends to pinch the negative gaps or empty areas within shapes. So if you look at this design, we have this white line. There's actually no white line here, but we have these white gaps, spaces in between these shapes. Now, if I just take this and put it on a dark background and colorize it white, this is what we get. Now, in general, this isn't bad, but now you look at those same gaps on a dark background and they look pinched. Now, if I go ahead and toggle this layer off and you look, the white space actually looks a little wider on a light colored background, but on a dark colored background, it becomes pinched. It looks less diminished. Is it? No, it's exactly the same. But that's what your eye does. And this problem is called irradiation. So we're going to fix that, and I'm going to show you how to approach this. The easiest way to approach it I found, and the way I fix it myself. So let's go ahead and turn on this layer. And I'm just taking one part of the design that I just showed you and blew it up just so you can see what I'm doing. Down below, this is where it started. And we're going to end up getting this result as we move forward. So this is just part of our artwork. I'm going to clone it, Command-C, Command-F, and that just gives me a copy of the shape. And all we're going to do now is I'll go ahead and select this magenta color. We'll give it an outline. We don't need a fill on this shape. So you can see the outline here. Let's go ahead and beef this up quite a bit. Let's go to, we can go to 3. And what I'm doing here is I'm going to establish a thickness. And we're using center line for the align stroke. So it's centered on the middle of that stroke. And if you choose like on the inside, it would push everything to inside. So you don't want to use this, and you definitely don't want to use outside. You want to use the middle one here. So have it set for that. But we need to go a little thicker because right now it's eating to the inside 1.5 points. If our line is 3, just think divided in half, we're going to go up to 6. That way it's eating to the inside 3 points. And once we've established the thickness we want, in this case 6, we're going to go ahead and go to Object, and we're going to go to Path, and we're going to outline this stroke now so it becomes a shape like this. Now, right now, if you go to the Appearance panel, you can see it's created a compound shape. And if I just drag it over, you see it's just sitting on top of the white. And what we're going to do now is underneath, we have the shape that is just the white fill, and we have this outline sitting on top. So I'm going to select both. And with that outline sitting on top, I'm going to go to Pathfinder. I'm going to go minus front in the Pathfinder palette. And it's going to trim off all of that 3-point area that's eating to the inside of our design. Now, one thing you want to do anytime you use Pathfinder methods like this, it was a compound, but as soon as we do this, it's going to revert to a group. So if you want to retain that compound, you would want to bring it back. You can do that by going to Object, Compound, and Make. But notice I have a keyboard shortcut, so I just hit F7 whenever I run a compound. I just hit F7, and it goes from a group, and it changes to a compound. And that's how you can improve that spacing, give it a little more gap there than what you have on a white background. But let's go ahead and go back to the art, and I want to show you what we end up with, and this is the end result. But let's compare it with our original design on dark. This is after we expanded it and made those gaps larger, and then our original one, and you can really see the stark contrast here. This is what we had. You see how it looks pinched, and now it looks like it has more breathing room. So I think that's going to work good. Well, how does it compare with the original colored art? This is on a dark colored background. This is a light colored background. So it goes good together in that context as well. So you want to pay attention to irradiation. You might run into it as you're designing a logo. Let's also take a look at another design. This is for a sports mascot for college, and I created this design. And one thing I like to do, and I always pay attention to, is I keep in mind that when I'm setting up final assets, I want to eventually provide to them not just a full color, but I want to provide to them black and white, and also a reversed version. So I keep that in mind as I build. So when I go to do that, it's easier to do that. So all we're going to do is focus on this design. I'm going to ungroup it. And you can do that by just going to ungroup like that. And then I'm going to select everything we don't need, like the shading. We don't need that. That's its own part. So I'll delete it. The gray shading here, again, it's just a shape sitting on top. We can go ahead and select these areas of white because those are sitting on top. We don't need those. And this bottom one with the bottom part of the chin of, in this case, the cougar, or bobcat that is, we'll bring that over, and that can be deleted. So we're just drilling down to only the shapes we need, which is the interior of the head, the eye, the nose and teeth, and the tongue. And we're going to select all of these, and we're going to go to Unite. Now, you're going to see something happen here. It happens at times, sometimes it doesn't, but we're going to go ahead and Unite. Notice all of these anchors, and we're going to zoom in here so you can see. If you ever run into this, before you try to clean it up or go into keyline mode and just select them and delete them, which you can do that, sometimes it's easier just to click the Unite button again right after doing it the first time, and it will resolve that problem. So that's how I usually clean it up. Sometimes you'll still have to go in and select them, but now that we have all of these white shapes sitting on top, notice it's a group, so I always turn this into a compound. Then we have the blue shape underneath it, so I'll just select the white on top of the blue, and with both selected, I'll go minus front, so we're just kind of punching through that blue shape. So what we end up with is just this blue shape that's sitting on top of the gray shape. So again, every time you run a compound, notice how it changed back to a group nature. I really wish it would just stick with the compound and retain it. For whatever reason, they won't add that. So you have to always pay attention, because if you continue to make edits, parts of your art might disappear. And that throws a lot of people off. It threw me off when I switched from freehand to Illustrator well over 20 years ago now, but it still throws people off. So make sure to change it to a compound nature. Then we can select the gray. Then we can go minus front again. Again, it's going to switch back to a group. This is where I'll change it back to a compound. And instead of gray, we're going to colorize it white. So we provide a reversed format of this brand asset. We have full color on left, the white on the right. that works on a dark colorized, or it'll even work in a photographic background like this. Maybe it's the football team schedule. So that's why you want to think about, as you're building your logo designs, how it's going to play out when you need to create other formats such as reverse format. And if you build it with that in mind, it's going to help you avoid a lot of hassle when the time comes to build out those assets. Another thing, when I create my art and deliver it to my clients, it's what I call a clean build. And this is a good example. All of these shapes, if I go into keyline mode, that's just Command Y, you can see they're all fused together. The antlers fused together with the head. It's nailed down in terms of universal brand colors, spec from the Pantone book, and that's great. But as I'm building a design, I only bring it to clean art once I'm creating the final assets. I always have a version of the art, for example, when I'm creating the comp, where it's not this way. So if I turn on this comp build here, and I turn it on and off, what's changing? Well, visually, nothing's changing. It looks identical because I get it to look the way I want it, even though it's not clean art. Meaning, if I select these and go to keyline view, you can see I can select these independent shapes just for the antlers, and they're not fused in. Why is that? Because like the bobcat I just showed you, I know at some point I need to create reverse graphics, and that's why I do it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to select this and ungroup it, just so we can select independent shapes. I have a couple groups here like that. So now we have antlers we can select, we have the head shapes we can select, and all I'm going to do in order to create a reverse graphic of this design is we're going to go ahead and offset the outside perimeter of the head shape itself. So we're going to go to Object, we're going to go to Path, we're going to go to Offset, and I want this, I don't want 10. I think the size I want is the same size I have at the top, which is about 6 points. So we'll go 6. And when you choose how you want it to join, you can have it do mitering. And if your art comes to a point, it can cause some really weird things. In this case, I usually choose round, because if there's a point, it'll just offset it with a round around that end of the point. And we'll click OK. Let's go ahead and color this differently so you can see the shape that we ended up creating. So why did I do this? Because this is a good example of not being the Nike logo. These two shapes are just going to be white fills. I wouldn't want to outline those. It'd make the artwork overly complex, and it wouldn't look that great either. So I'm going to select the outline we just did, the offset that is we just did with the antlers, and I'm going to go unite using the Pathfinder. I'm going to take all of these shapes here, the eyes, the nose highlight, and the face, all these, and it doesn't matter what colors they are, we'll unite them all together. It'll default to whichever one's the topmost shape in your document. And I make it a compound path. It doesn't matter what color, because we're not going to need color here. I'm just going to select the background shape of the bear's head, and we're going to minus front. It just punches through that shape. And now with that shape on top, I'll select the magenta color. Once again, don't worry about the color because it's not going to stay that color. We're just going to minus front again, and that minuses out that shape from that. We can select everything, unite it together. It's going to default to a group, so I always make it a compound path. And we're going to go ahead and color it white. And you're not going to be able to see it because the background's white. So let's turn on a dark background. And that's what we end up with, is a nice reverse format of one of our primary brand assets. And I do that for all the various brand assets I create, all the various formats. This shows all the formats we worked on here. And one thing you want to keep in mind is when you look at a primary brand graphic like this, notice the bear, and there's this nice gap in between the bottom of the bear and the type. But when my original design for not for usage on a light colored background, it's closer because I don't have this outline around it. So you need to keep that in mind, because you can see between these two, the one on the bottom, I had to move up to create that gap. And if I just left it like it is in the primary brand assets for both spot, CMYK, and black and white, it's closer like this. So what I usually do, it's an easy fix. I just move it the same distance of the offset I did. So I'll just select it at the bottom, slide it up till it snaps to where that inside, let's do that again. I kind of messed that up like this, and it snaps, and now it has that same gap in between the bottom, and it's going to work. So just a small detail you need to pay attention to so it's consistent and works in every context. We did reverse, that's just white on a dark background, and we also did a colored reverse format as well. I'm going to provide all of them in the final files for my client. The key to creating reverse brand assets is knowing it ultimately needs to work on a light and dark colored background. And keeping that usage in mind when you build your original designs will make creating reverse brand assets easier when the time comes to do so. Thank you for watching People Love Process. And as always, I hope this information helps you in your own creative process.